The records in the county courthouse reveal that the Dobie family arrived in Live Oak County in 1875. At that time, the courthouse was here where we're gathered. Now it's in George West. J. Frank Dobie was the eldest of the 6 children born to Richard and Ella Dobie. But there can be no doubt that this land is very important to him, because in virtually every one of his writings that I have looked into, I have found something that he said himself about the land in which he was raised. Sometimes the reference was short, and sometimes it was quite detailed. In Coronado's Children, he describes Live Oak County this way: human tracks and human blood will not wash out of a soil, although cement may hide them. The region between the Nueces and the Rio Grande is not cemented over. Comparatively little of it will ever be cemented over. It will always be a land with a past. Dobie described it like this in Some Part of Myself: it is not a rich land. Caliche hills and thorned brush make a section of it forbidding. The remainder is sandy-ish. Yet a sweep of oaks and valleys, wooded Remerania Creek, and live oak trees scattered singly and clustered into groves make the ranch gracious. One of the live oaks has the largest spread in all that part of Texas. Chili pequins, the little round red Mexican peppers, grow wild under it. In his book Cow People, Dobie wrote, one winter evening in the late year of the 19th century, the boy who long ago became the past tense of me sighted a wagon drawn by 2 horses approaching our house at a tempo in harmony with the coming of dusk. In those times, the sight of a horseman, a buggy, a wagon, or any human being was an event. For a while, we got our mail at Dinero, and I rode horseback once or twice a week to get it. I knew certain places where I'd seen deer cross the road. I knew 2 glades where quail were plentiful. I knew a hollow live oak tree off the road a bit, where buzzards annually nested. I knew where I was almost sure to see a paisano running down the road, though I might see one anywhere. If it had rained, I could expect a certain caliche hill covered with ceniza bushes to be turned by their sudden flowers from ashen gray to solid lavender. I always enjoyed seeing the cattle eat wahio leaves. I knew where the redbirds migrating for the north were thickest in the wintertime. In Singers and Storytellers, he wrote, many nights out on the front gallery with Papa, Mama inside with the endless work, we listened to an owl and crickets and to the coyotes and to the wind from the Gulf galloping in the treetops, and to other components of silence. The portion of the ranch where the house in which J. Frank Dobie was born were part of the Dobie Ranch property comprised of some 4,152 acres of land that was purchased by a group of 6 men from Houston, led by Ralph Jackson of Beeville. The sale was completed in the summer of 1951. I met Ralph Jackson in Beeville in 1952 and found him to be one of the finest gentlemen I have ever known. Ralph Jackson became my brother's father-in-law a few years later. In the process of the sale negotiations, Ralph Jackson showed his notes and writings about the Jackson family history in Chambers County to Dobie, who strongly urged him to write a book, so he did. Ralph Jackson called his book Home on the Double Bayou. Dobie wanted Jackson to get the book published. In 1961, he wrote the following introduction to Home on the Double Bayou. This is part of it. Land has been personal to me from the time I began having feelings. Certain live oaks, certain patches of grass, certain bends in Remerania Creek, certain Mustang grapevines draping trees along the bank, certain hills on the ranch where I was born and reared remain more vivid to me and are more a part of me than numbers of people I knew while I was putting down roots into that part of earth. Whatever in the land pulled me, it was not property values. They were meager anyhow. But after my mother died in 1948 and the ranch was inherited by 6 brothers and sisters, it had to become property. My sister Fanny and I were executors. In 1951, we sold it to Ralph Jackson and 5 other men associated with him. I was satisfied with the inevitable transference of deeds to the land. I had strong feelings on who should possess the deeds. Ralph Jackson and Dobie became fast friends, and Ralph and Dobie exchanged correspondence with each other through the years. A big thank you to Jimmy Jackson, who generously provided copies of that correspondence and gave me permission to share them. The earliest is dated June the 24th, 1952. Dear Ralph, I was in Beeville last Wednesday, and that night I went back to the ranch and slept. I found the key under the steps, and I had my bedroll and spread it on the gallery floor where the breeze struck me. It wasn't until I was leaving the next morning that I discovered you have butane gas, but I enjoyed coffee and eggs cooked over a mesquite fire out in front of the house. I'm much obliged to you. I was delighted on the green look of everything, except for the many old dead oaks, and also the improvements you all are making. This land will always be dear to me, and nobody wants it to thrive more than I do. One little thing I'll tell you about. In the kitchen, I saw 3 small boxes of matches on the shelf, and mice or some other creature had gnawed off one end of one of the boxes, the end opposite the heads of the matches. I have heard of mice setting a house on fire. I put the match boxes in the tin bread box stored with various things. Subsequent correspondence in 57 and 58 mostly discussed business matters. August 30th, 1958, letter to Jackson reads in part, "Your saying that blue quail have appeared on the ranch surprises me. I don't recollect them at all out there. Years ago, there must have been hundreds of bob whites in the old field and in the hills. I'm certainly glad they're coming back." Several business letters later, this one dated October 25th, describes a visit to the ranch. Probably Jimmy told you that he saw my sisters Martha and Fanny and me on the way back to Dinero from the ranch. It was way long in the afternoon when we arrived out there, but we enjoyed eating lunch on one of the benches in front of the house. I never saw such big acorns as those on the trees at the well and pens near the ranch house. I've planted a few of them in cans. I'd love to have a descendant of that oak tree. After we got into the hills west of Dinero, we began seeing lots of quail and lots of paisanos. The best destroyers of rats and mice are snakes and hawks. It's drought and people that really deplete the quail population. A letter from Frank Dobie to Ralph Jackson dated October 25th, 58, expressed his concerns about the condition of the rock house with the damaged wall. "I guess you noticed the big crack in the wall of the rock house at the northeast corner. 4 years before you all bought the place, I had the rock walls all repaired. One could see daylight into the east fireplace. Of course, those caliche blocks are a poor form of stone, but they have stood there going on 80 or 90 years now. My mother bore me in that east room a little over 70 years ago. I don't apologize for feeling sentimental toward the rock part of that house." On December 9th, 58, Dobie wrote to Ralph, "When I was a youngish man, my mother said to me one time in Beeville, 'You think more of land than you think of people.' I was always going out to the ranch instead of staying in town to visit. I think a good deal of some people, but I realize that land is more personal to me than many people. I suppose I knew hundreds of particular trees, swags, hills, creeks, stretches of grass and the like between here and Beeville. If I had any skill as a map maker and drawer with pen and ink, I could make a landscape picture of the old ranch in Live Oak County." In some parts of myself, Dobie wrote, "No matter what is discontinued, the land remains. 1,000 years, 10,000 years hence, the Dobie Ranch will be where it was before the Ramirez Grant took in a portion of its pristine acreage. It will have other names, be divided, and then be absorbed." J. Frank Dobie's career took him to universities in the United States and abroad, but his love for Texas was never lost. In Corners of Texas, a copy of his handwritten will reads in part, "I don't want to be buried in any damned memorial park, and I hope that friends instead of undertaker hirelings will throw dirt in on me. I would not mind being buried in the state cemetery, somewhere in the vicinity of Bigfoot Wallace. Otherwise, I'd just as soon have my body burned and the ashes scattered among the live oaks and mesquites on my old ranch home, to which almost every day of my life I have returned in memory in Live Oak County.
If you ever hear my name